We return now to our top stories, the energy corruption saga embroiling Ukraine, and where to next for the war-torn country as winter hits. Joining me for more is Elisabeth Braw, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
So President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is vowing to, quote, clean up his country's energy sector in the wake of those kickback scheme allegations. I mean, do you view this as the worst, if not one of the worst, scandals of his presidency?
It certainly isn't looking good for him, and the challenge is that he's not new in the office anymore. In the office of president, people are familiar with his shortcomings, but it is a war, and so there won't be an election. So his legitimacy is essentially based on him being able to show that he is the right person to lead the country, even though there can't be an election. And so crises like these, and this is really a severe crisis because it is about the conduct of the government, are really extremely unhelpful. And we should remember that the conduct of the war, it depends on Ukrainians stepping up to do that part, to when they are called up for military duty, to not try to escape, for civilians to try to keep the country going in their different roles. And if they view the country as or those near the top or at the top as not doing their part, then that morale risks being undermined, which is why it's so important for him to clear up this corruption scandal as soon as possible.
We've seen Ukraine's European allies really come in to support, actually, Ukraine's anti-corruption efforts in recent days. But do these headlines, regardless, run the risk of impacting Kyiv's political capital, kind of its ability to keep the West on side? And I'm particularly thinking of Washington here.
I don't think Western support will fundamentally be altered, but of course Western governments, or the Western governments that support Ukraine, will start thinking about where is our money going? Is there a risk of it ending up in wrong hands? And that it remains incredibly important for President Zelenskyy to show that he is tackling this with the utmost force, because if there is any doubt, then, as you say, in Washington and even maybe in some European capitals, doubts will begin to grow, or voices will begin to grow that say, well, we shouldn't help Ukraine to the same extent because we don't know where our money is going. And that would be a massive disservice to the Ukrainian armed forces, because they remain valiant on the battlefield and they need all the support they can get. But corruption scandals threaten to undermine not just the morale among the soldiers, but also the support they may get from Western governments.
Now, at the same time, Russia has launched another wave of attacks on Ukraine. Will Vladimir Putin be targeting this winter as a time to grind down the Ukrainian people, to try and make this winter as unbearable as possible, given the somewhat diplomatic standoff that we're seeing in terms of any peace negotiations?
I remember vividly the first winter of this war, so the winter of 2022, and we heard then that it was going to be a brutal winter for the Ukrainians because the Russians would try to make life as miserable as possible for them, and the Ukrainians somehow made it through just enormous determination and resilience. And then since then they have made it through the winter of 2023 and 2024, and so regrettably they have some experience getting through brutal winters that are made even more brutal by Russian aggression. But I think a challenge here is that war awareness could begin to set in, and people could begin to say, is it worth the effort? And that's why this corruption scandal is so it's so important to root it out, so that nobody is left with the impression that some people near the top are not doing their part. But Russia is certainly making things much worse by targeting energy infrastructure, which is why it remains incredibly important for Ukraine's Western allies to try to help as much as they can with efforts that can help provide Ukraine with energy and keep other essential services going.
Well, Ukraine has also penned a deal with Greece this weekend for US liquefied gas to flow through that country, almost €2 billion worth over the coming months. How important is this for Kyiv's energy security, especially as those attacks on infrastructure ramp up?
It is important. I think what's even more important than the quantity of energy in this case, it is that Greece is the partner in question. Greece has not done very much for Ukraine. In fact, Greece has been, I would say, unhelpful in not cracking down on its ship owners who, some of its ship owners, not all, some of its ship owners who sell ships into the shadow fleet. And the shadow fleet, as we know, is what keeps the Russian oil exports going, that brings money into the Russian treasury, which allows the Russian government to keep fighting this war. So if the Greek government had cracked down more effectively on such sales of ships into the shadow fleet, then we wouldn't have this big shadow fleet. So it's good that that Greece is stepping up on this occasion in providing energy. I would hope that they would also have a word with those ship owners who sell their ships into the shadow fleet, and that the Greek government would point out to them that it is a highly immoral thing to do, and that it helps prolong the war in Ukraine.
As we head into winter, how do you view Russia's strength right now relative to Ukraine? I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we've had so much diplomatic back and forth in recent months. Russian forces also now making inroads in the eastern Donetsk region and, of course, Pokrovsk. I mean, is Putin gathering momentum and power? Is he losing it?
He is playing for time because he knows that Russia has, and we all know that Russia has switched its economy from a regular economy to a war economy. We also know that he has access to more people who can serve in the armed forces because Russia has a larger population. And as we know, Russia gives bonuses to or allows prison inmates to get out of prison if they agree to serve in the armed forces. So time is on Russia's side, and President Putin obviously went to launch this war thinking it would take a few days, but now he has clearly made peace, so to speak, with the fact that it's going to take a lot longer, and he doesn't seem likely to give up unless pressured into serious negotiations, and that's why it's so important that Western countries remain on the side of Ukraine, and of course the United States can play a particularly important role there. So I think the hope in every Western capital is that Donald Trump will put pressure on Vladimir Putin, because really at the end of the day that is what counts. But in the meantime, as much support as possible for the Ukrainian armed forces.
And we're running out of time, but in your mind, what happens next? I mean, we have a wavering Washington, we have Brussels going around and round in circles on frozen assets, now these corruption and bribery allegations in Ukraine, and as you mentioned earlier, kind of going to the heart of a question of trust in authority and institution. Where does Kyiv go from here?
So much hinges on the personality of President Zelenskyy, in his because his personality and his power of persuasion is what will convince Western governments to keep supporting Ukraine. And it's obviously also crucial within Ukraine itself, which is why it's so incredibly important for him to root out this corruption scandal and communicate to Ukrainian voters and to the rest of the world that he has the situation under control and is serious about being a leader who can represent all Ukrainians and will respect or will accept no unethical behavior on his watch, and it's that moral platform that he has to keep maintaining, and let's hope he does that, because Ukraine needs to prevail in this conflict, or in this against its invader, I should say.
Elisabeth Braw, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, thank you as always for your time.
Thank you.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World for more. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.